not in my right mind from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. I was already pressing the limits on a daily to either die or go to prison. My own actions started causing my family harm. We make choices in life, but you don't get to choose your consequences. I'm really, really grateful for what I got back. Every day's a work in progress. Every day's a choice and a chance to do something different. And I'm just trying to do my best.
After I have that first one, I'm no longer in control. I really wanted to quit. And then I would wake up the next morning and have no choice. I'd lost my identity and I didn't know who I was. I just had nothing left. And I needed help so bad. It all came down on me. I could not pull myself out of it. I had hit rock bottom. I just knew I was gonna die. And I remember just praying that foxhole prayer, like, God, please just get me through this moment. I'll stop doing bad. I will stop everything. The goal of my podcast is to not only educate people on, mental health, but also let people know that they're not alone.
Maddie, welcome.
What's up, bro?
How's everything going?
Good, man. Yourself?
Good. You came in from DC.
I did.
How long you been in DC for?
I've been living up in Northern Virginia for 5 years and been in Virginia about 10 total, but DC area the last 5.
What part of Virginia were you living in before the 5 years?
Just north of Richmond for about 5, and then this last 5, I'm like suburbs right outside of DC.
And you're by way of New York.
Yeah, I am.
Born and raised.
Born and raised. Lived in Brooklyn until I was 7 or 8 years old, and then Long Island the rest of the way.
What part of Brooklyn did you grow up in?
Canarsie, East New York, until about, like I said, 7 or 8. And then parents came into a little bit of money, very small amount, but it was just enough to move us out to the suburbs, and rest of the way, South Shore, Long Island, Suffolk.
Do you have any childhood memories of East New York, Canarsie?
I do. As young as I was, it was a rough place. Looking back, I'm an only child, seeing my parents try and struggle and living in a 2-bedroom, in a real tough part of town, in a real tough era in New York City's history, I got some memories, man, for sure. It was like, I didn't understand at the time, but like my parents were trying to raise me like almost during the Wild West era of that part of Brooklyn, and then I remember moving out to Long Island, and just because we had a small front yard and backyard, I thought we like living in the country, because I was such a city kid before that, and meanwhile you look back, it's really just the suburbs, I remember feeling like we lived on a farm after we moved, so yeah, man.
Out to the burbs of Long Island.
That's it.
Little did you know what you were about to get into.
I'm telling you, so.
What was life like for you transitioning schools, going from, city atmosphere in Brooklyn and,
sure.
high.
It was definitely a change of pace, not knowing anybody. Again, only child, moving out there, and, trying to make friends, being made fun of just because you didn't know how to ride a bike because, in Brooklyn you had a sidewalk and a one-way, there was no riding bicycles or things like that. So like, it was hard to interact, because I didn't grow up doing normal things that like suburb kids did, and then looking back too, what the toughest transition was looking back was my parents kind of lost their social life, moving out there, trying to give me something better, everybody they knew, all the family members was, Staten Island or Brooklyn, heavy Italian neighborhoods. And they kind of left that all behind just to kind of try and give me a shot at something better, So looking back, it kind of was hard on everybody in the house, just trying to find a way into something new, But again, I was so young, like I didn't understand at the time just how big that small move is. It's like 35, 40 miles on a map. It's nothing, but to us guys from New York, it's a whole other world, and we know that. So, that was, man, it was definitely a lot. Some good, some bad, but it's a lot for sure.
Moving could be a traumatic event, especially not knowing anyone.
For sure.
You were saying with your parents, they left their friends behind, their close friends behind, moving out to Long Island. Now, you were young. You probably didn't know entirely what was going on. However, did you feel that energy from your parents when you were 8, 9 years old, just moving out to Long Island?
Absolutely. Without discrediting my parents for trying to do their best, there's no manual for how to raise kids. I'm a father myself. So I think they did their best with what they had, but what they really, they were hard workers. They come from nothing. Nothing was handed to them at all. And all they knew was to get to work. And with that, I didn't grow up playing catch with my dad or doing things with my family or any family for that matter. Very isolated, very alone. And looking back, my father isolated himself with his work. He was an emergency responder in New York City for 33 years. He loved what he did, and my mother really isolated herself, like depression-wise, and, wouldn't leave the house, wouldn't go anywhere, nothing. I think it was culture shock for everybody, you know what I mean? So that started real young, and then, like you said, 8, 9, and even moving forward into the teen years, I don't think my parents ever really recovered from that transition of lifestyle and leaving what they knew their whole lives behind, So
your father is working in the city.
Sure.
He is, I'm assuming, emergency response. He's working 8 to maybe even 12-hour days, long days.
He was a 12-hour-a-day guy, plus the commute.
Yeah.
And my mother was working downtown Brooklyn, too. So with the commute, she was gone 10 hours a day. So tons of time by myself. They're gone out of the house, They're stressed. Looking back now, I know. They're stressed. They're depressed. They're worried about money, and they're not functioning either, as individuals and as a couple or as parents, So it's just kind of this, this odd world growing up in, and you're trying to make friends and so on and so forth,
What's that like for you? You don't have brothers or sisters.
Right.
Your parents are always gone,
right.
working. Again, they're doing the best they can.
Correct.
They're trying to make ends meet to provide for you.
Sure.
And provide for the family as a whole. What was the experience like, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, growing up in an empty house? Was it freedom? Was it?
It was the exact opposite of freedom. I think my mother and the way she viewed the world, my father was emergency response for the MTA. So, he responded to both trade center incidents, the one in 93, the one in 01. And my mother worked for the NYPD for 10 years as a civilian before having me. And so both of them just had this very grim distortion of the world. Like they just constantly saw the worst that, the world had to offer. So it was the opposite of freedom. It wasn't like, hey, Matt, go out and play. Maybe later in life, when I kind of took that freedom as a teenager, but growing up, it was like, stay in the house, don't go outside. When you come home off the bus, no one's going to be home for 4 hours, 5 hours. We're stuck in traffic, whatever. Make yourself something to eat. Don't go anywhere. Lockdown. The world's a bad place. And so it was very much the opposite of freedom growing up.
So they saw the evil of the world firsthand. For example, 93, 2001, September 11th.
Absolutely.
And did they instill fear in you as a kid?
110%. I say that easily, and I say that with the greatest respect to them, as they're both, passed away, and yeah, they instilled it all. Like I walked around feeling my entire childhood like whatever could happen was not only gonna happen, but was gonna happen to me quick, and just that negative mentality, almost like a cloud over the house, And it was tough, trying to find outlets to break that mindset. And I don't think I did ever break that mindset as a kid. It's just something that was instilled. So that's kind of how I grew up.
Did you bring that fear with you going into middle school, into high school? And what was that like for you? Were you walking around with fear and carrying it on your shoulders in high school?
Definitely. more than I knew at the time, you know, because you're young, you're a kid, you don't know what you're feeling. You know, you're growing up, you know, those years where you shoot up 6 inches in a year and grow a beard, you know what I mean? Like, you're going through it all, right? But I definitely was afraid of the world to many degrees. And, you know, I saw a lot, and then I would also hear a lot in the house, you know, meaning like my father being a first responder, he would pass those stories down and he would be unbothered, but I'd hear these things and be freaked out. And so, you know, I come up through middle school and things like that. And then high school happens, you know, and I start getting into a little bit of trouble, drinking, so on and so forth. And got into some pretty bad fights early on, you know, and one in particular sticks out where, you know, I consider I almost lost my life in a brawl in the 10th grade on Halloween, you know, and, you know, fractured nose, fractured skull, concussion, the works. And so all those fears came true in my mind at like 15 years old. Like, everything I was warned about that was going to happen, it came when you're out, like, you know, as a teenager, running amok a little bit, but, you know, still being innocent, not trick-or-treating, but out having fun on Halloween, you know, New York style, as I like to call it. And, you know, that beatdown did come. And that moment when you're laying there thinking you're going to lose your life, it did happen. So now I'm thinking like, wow, my parents were right. Like, they haven't been lying my whole life. Like, this is real. And, you know, certain people respond to fear different ways. And I know, looking back now as a grown man, like, no matter how afraid I was, I started to build this thing that you almost couldn't hurt. This person that, you know, had this tough exterior. As you see me now, right, as covered in tattoos, whatever, you know, but really it stems originally, you know, before I became a man. It all comes from fear. You know, if you're afraid of getting hurt or what the world's going to do to you, you almost want to build something that's indestructible. I didn't knowingly do that at that age, but that's what was going on. And as that's going on, I'm messing up more and more in school. You know, I don't want to say hanging with the wrong people, but I wasn't the right people either, right?
You were the leader of the bad people. No, I'm just kidding.
To an extent, it's very true, you know? And, you know, as a youngster, man, like, you know, eventually kicked out of school, had to go to a separate program, you know, like beginning of the 11th grade year, was finally so out of control with, you know, fighting and drinking and just being a knucklehead, you know. I got removed from school, had to finish up at a separate school, you know, an alternative center around the corner. And, yeah, man, and then off into the world, you know. So that was childhood. And that negativity from my folks, it never, even as I became a young man, it never stopped. It's not on them how I turned out. Like, you know, me and certain people have discussed, right, like accountability. At the end of the day, it's on us how we turn out, what we choose to do. But it definitely, to a degree, molded, you know, what the man I became. So, yeah.
We were saying before, your parents did the best that they could, and I couldn't imagine being at ground zero in 2001, you know, right after September 11th happened, and having a child.
Yeah.
I think I would respond the same way, thinking there's evil out there. So to your parents' credit, they did the best with what they had.
Absolutely.
And my question for you is, you talked about the fight that you had gotten, the number of fights that you gotten into,
1 or 2,
getting kicked out of school. What you were fearing was actually coming true, those evils. Do you think you thought those evils in your head and they ended up coming true because you were almost anticipating them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great way of putting it. You know, like, I feel like whatever you put out in this world, you get back, you know, and yeah, sometimes life comes and kicks you in the ass, no matter how positive you are, right? Of course. But when you're walking around with that negative mentality, it finds you, man. You know, you leave the house looking for a problem, you're going to find one, you know, and I'm a young kid thinking I want problems, you know, once I'm, you know, kind of fear-based reacting, to how I was raised or things I went through that were outside of my parents' control, so on and so forth. And I'll even admit, like, especially even after like 9/11 happened, because I was on the phone with my mother when the second tower went down, and she was screaming, "Matthew, I can't see anything. There's smoke everywhere." And it just cuts out, and I looked up at the TV in the school. I see that second tower drop. So I saw my mother. I didn't know if she was okay or not. And then she showed up home like 8 hours later. And then I didn't see my father for 2 weeks. He was down there working, helping clear out rubble, So there was this whole, lineage of like, the world is bad, the world is bad, the world is bad. I get hurt real bad about a year before 9/11. 9/11 also happens. And it's like, at that point, it's like, Matthew, stay in the house. And the result of that is I'm leaving the house. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, I rebelled, when you try to lock a kid down too hard, in my opinion, a father of 4, when you don't give them slack at all, they're going to take it one way or the other. And, I took a mile and then some, really ran amok, in a response. And again, personal responsibility. I chose to do all this, right? But definitely ran the hell amok, but also at the same time, portraying this unstoppable, whatever, tough guy exterior. But in the end, some people might think it sounds ridiculous, but in the beginning, when you're a kid, you don't start off this way. No one's born some tough guy, It really, I was afraid of the world, if I'm being really honest with you, man. I was afraid of the world. And heavy drinking at a young age was one of the symptoms of that, along with as much violence as I could find, even at a young age. Started drinking, started raiding the liquor cabinet at like 11, 12 years old. And then by the time I'm 14, 15, it's keg parties and stuff like that. But once I got hooked onto that, all right, we're at the keg party, we're having a good time, talking to some girls. Then maybe you get into it with the older guys at the keg party and you win a couple of fights and it becomes this thing and it becomes this image and you chase it. And then before you know it, you're a young man. And, I was young. I became a young man not even thinking, but when you're a kid, it's an image. Then once you're a young man in your 20s and you're carrying on the same behavior or worse, it's not an image anymore. It's become who you are at that time and what you're doing. And, yeah, man, childhood really, looking back, it's set up a lot of things in motion that I've carried on through my entire life, and it's took a lot to kind of turn the ship around, but here we are,
Sounds like you doubled down on the fear and you wanted to overcome it and you wanted to face fear head on.
Absolutely.
And it was an image through your teens, through high school, and then it morphed into a lifestyle into your 20s.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then also, if I get at you first or I hurt you first, you can't hurt me, And so like a victim mentality became almost like a bully mentality, which really sucks, and it's hard to admit to myself in those younger years, not necessarily enjoying behaving that way, but consistently participating or behaving in that manner. You know what I mean? That's tough. You know what I mean? That's tough, because, you come up around guys that, how guys are, especially young guys, who feed into each other. Oh, bro, you knocked him out.
Ego.
That,
100% ego.
That part.
Yep.
And, you think it's cool, but then just to get into the confrontations, I'd be liquored up. You know what I mean? And then I'd kind of smile like, yeah, I'm the king of the bar again, which is, it's small-minded, and you end up waking up the next day feeling bad about whatever you did the night before, even if somebody, quote unquote, deserved it or you were in the right. But, it's another night, another fight. Maybe you're hurt, maybe they're hurt. You don't know if you're getting arrested, so on and so forth. And it's a miserable feeling. And it becomes even more of a reason to drink. And then that drinking monster, by the time you're in your mid-20s, by the time I was in my mid-20s, daily, regular, drinking to the good times, drinking to the bad, Something to celebrate. Let's crack one. You know what I mean? Life is vicious right now. Let's drink and be more vicious at life, and so on and so forth, I'd love to say that behavior stopped when I became a father. I became a father at 23. Didn't stop. My child's always enough, but becoming a dad was not enough to wake me up yet to that type of behavior and why I was doing what I was doing, at the time in my earlier years.
Were you married at that when you had your first child? Walk us the timeline there. You got married.
So I wasn't married when I became a father. I took a bouncing job at what I consider to be one of the toughest bars on Long Island at the time, at 19 years old. And I started working there at 19, 20, 21, into my early 20s. And we met there at the bar. You know what I mean? I think she's cute. I know she's underage because she was behind me by a year in school. I'm not even old enough to be drinking in the bar, right? So I'm 20. I know she's 19. Think she's cute. I let her in. Long story short, I get the number. We connect, link up. Date on and off for a little bit in the beginning, eventually have our first kid, a beautiful daughter,
Wait, spoiler alert. You didn't call her, right? You told me in the car you didn't call. I am outing you right now, dude.
Put me on the spot. She's going to love this one. That's right. So she's
phenomenal.
She's the best. She's awesome. She came in the bar. She was so good looking. I kind of got challenged to talk to her by somebody. And this is a well-known story that she knows too. I didn't have the nuts to kind of go over and talk to her. And, somebody put me on the spot like, oh, you're the big tough guy, scared of a good-looking woman now. You're not going to go over and talk. So I went over and talked. Get the number. Too scared to call. I'd love to pretend like I knew what I was doing or I was being some type of player or, whatever, because she's a gorgeous woman, And I didn't call her. And a week later, she walks into the bar, and I'm sitting there at the bar because I'm there 7 nights a week, whether I'm working or not, right? And I'm sitting there having a drink. She comes out, I immediately put my head down. I came up with some excuse about how my phone broke and I lost her number. And she believes me, and I pull the same phone out again, and she's looking at me like, you asshole, And I'm just like, and then I call her and so on and so forth. So we have 4 beautiful children. We've been together since I'm 20 and she's 19, through good times and bad. There's some breakups, some makeups, some heartache. We got married after our second child, and I believe I was like 28. So we've been together. A couple months will be 19 years, and then we've been married for just over 10. So
that's awesome.
It is. It's definitely, her and I are definitely, in my opinion, a little different story than most. She put up with a lot of crap, man, a lot. And she is loyal to the soil, in my opinion. She's unbelievable. That woman taught me what grace and forgiveness is, because I didn't know it a day in my life until I really messed the family up with my drinking and my behavior and this and that. And then when I made myself vulnerable enough to be open to putting it back together and putting my life back together separate from my family so that I could have a family, she gave me enough forgiveness and grace where I had the opportunity to get my family back, which was, and still is, it's probably the greatest act of kindness I've ever experienced in my life, which to me it keeps me going. It really does, with not drinking and things like that. So, but yeah, man, I didn't call her. You got me. Good for you. That's awesome.
Well, I heard her on the phone, and again, another spoiler alert. You and I went to high school together, and she went to our high school. So that's amazing. I know that you do have a girl that holds it down for you. And
she does.
Through thick and thin. And how many times has she stitched you up?
Oh my goodness.
She learned how to do stitches just for you.
You know what? Sometimes it started off with glue, if I'm being honest. I mean, she's definitely put me back together in more ways than one. The physical and all the other, lovey-dovey emotional stuff. But I mean, I've definitely come home. I've come home so drunk and I wake up and, she's out to here pregnant. Did you get into a fight last night? I'm like, the f you talking? And I'm in my mind, I'm still out of it from the night before, probably still drunk. I'm like, who'd she talk to, And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And like, that could have been anything. I could have had a black eye, broke hands, whatever. She's like, asshole, there's a hole in your arm. You got stabbed. And I'm like, all right. Yeah, I was in a fight last night. And I'm thinking, she's so upset at the time. I'm thinking she's going to go into labor early or something. Like I really put this woman through a lot, But yeah, to answer your question, that woman has physically wrapped me up, taped me up, driven me to the hospital, driven me away from some bad places before I've, gone to prison. I might be saying too much there, but I've definitely called her up and been like, it's a long running joke. She's like, I called her one time. I'm like, I'm running. She's like, where? I was like, I'm just running. She found me running away from the scene of a bar fight, and that part of the person got hurt real bad, and it's not something I'm proud of. But yeah, came, picked me up, got me out the way. I mean, dealt with the aftermath of that, the blowback of who I hurt. And, she's been there through everything. She really has. She's unbelievable. Yeah, she's put me back together and I didn't call her back. Imagine that. So
you're bartending through your 20s.
Bartending and bouncing. More bouncing than bartending, but both. Into my early 20s. Early to mid 20s, I started doing construction, some union, some non-union. I was in a couple different locals back home, and then I, right before I turned 30, I moved down to Virginia, bounced around, odd jobs, this and that, tried to open some businesses, one in New York, one in the Richmond, Virginia area. Everything failed. Father passes away when I'm 32, while we're in Richmond. I had already lost my mother when I was 25, so both parents gone, no blood relatives left, like back against the wall. And because of my early to mid 20s, the things that went on, I promised my wife, because she had seen some horrific, there was one fight in particular that was it was pretty bad. I remember I turned around, she was crying. She thought I was, she figured I was done for. And, I promised her I'd never bounce again. So flash forward, it's like 2017, 2018, just buried my father, watched him pass, found my mother deceased in my mid 20s, found her in the house, she's gone, and we got no money. And, we're in a state with no family, like her family's back in New York. My family's deceased or detached from that move in the early 90s from Brooklyn to Long Island, which looking back was so significant on my family's path. I end up going back to bouncing, bouncing, bodyguarding work, any kind of security gig you could get, fast cash, from the best of jobs to the worst of jobs. I've worked it. And that's been a lot on the family, and it also took a toll going back to the drinking. I'm drinking my way through all this, find your mother deceased, 25. Me and my father polished off like a bottle and a half of Johnny Walker that day, after they pulled her out of the house. And then just drinking all the way through. And then the heightened sense of awareness and constantly being in harm's way from doing security work and certain types of security work. You're drinking through it, man. At least I did. I'm coming home and I'm putting down a bottle of whiskey, then one bottle becomes 2 bottles. And then, putting a little size on or being the bigger guy in a fight helps. It helps with being employed. It helps with winning a fight and making sure you go home to your family. So into my 30s, as I'm doing this security work, as I return to that lifestyle, which, is something unfortunately I know far too well. I'm on steroids too, and I'm not just using them, I'm abusing them. I'm like, I'm not saying whether I'm for or against steroids. It's really, I'm but I could say faithfully that I was abusing the hell out of steroids. Like, if you're supposed to take something for 2 months, I ran it for 2 years, you know, and at the same time,
10 weeks is a cycle.
yeah, 10 weeks is a cycle, but it's only one cycle if you never come off, right? So, yeah, man, just, you know, walking around this big drunken mess that's just not healed, you know, haven't processed losing the first parent in 2010, losing another parent 2017, you know, without going too much into it, losing a lot of close people in my life, whether it be to overdoses or murders, just due to lifestyle, you know, kind of being in the street, you know, and things like that. And eventually, you know, my drinking was always out of control. You know, I think it was just a matter of what I got away with. And I got away with everything, you know, no matter what I did or how bad it ever got. You know, like I've never been convicted of a crime, no DUIs, which is unbelievable. I have no idea, you know, and it was hard to find rock bottom with drinking after I started 11, 12 years old, start doing it regularly at 14. And now I'm 34, 35, still going. I've been drinking for 20 years and I'm only in my mid 30s, you know. But eventually, you know, we make choices in life, you know, but you don't get to choose your consequences. And eventually those things come through, right? And, you know, they were late, but it wasn't never. Those consequences came later in my life. And, you know, tough to talk about, but to be honest, you know, back in 2020, my drinking and my steroid use is completely out of control. I mean, I'm not in my right mind at any point in the day. I start having panic attacks from work, you know, the situations that comes from work, different life situations, whatever, you know, even just being the head of the household, 4 kids, the water shut off. That's stressful, you know. I start having panic attacks. I get put on prescription benzos. At the same time, I'm pumping myself with enough steroids to kill a horse, you know, and drinking a bottle or 2 of Crown Royal a day. And I mean, I was not, like I said, you know, not in my right mind from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed.
And this is with 4 kids.
This is with 4 kids, man, and trying to pay the bills and trying to balance life. And life was not balanced. It was just total lopsided. Matt's completely out of control. That was our life for years, for a few years, you know, until things eventually came to a head, you know.
Bro, your Instagram was so lit in 2020. You were benching like 400 pounds. I remember watching some of the videos on Instagram. I'm like, this guy's out of his mind.
And I was, you know, I'll be honest with you, you know, it was 435, by the way. I'm kidding. I'm not.
You're not.
I'm not. But, you know, like I would go in on I'd go into the gym meeting, like 2 hours of sleep, still drunk, sipping in the car. And I'm looking at my buddy like sideways. I'm like, load another plate on the bar. He's like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, and holy dude.
So you joined a biker club. How old were you when you joined a biker club?
I'll say this. I'll say this. I'm a proud member of the greatest motorcycle club on earth. But whatever happened between me and that club that I love dearly, where my heart will stay between me and them. And then also, while acknowledging that, I will say that there's a biker lifestyle that I definitely looked up to before I took a step in a direction of joining a club. And when I make the, you know, because again, personal accountability, right? I chose to be a maniac with or without people by my side. But like when it comes to my club, a lot of people know what club I'm in. If they do, that's fine. You know, like if you know, that's great. But, you know, what's between me and them is just between me and them. It's a real special thing I keep close to my heart, and I keep our business close too, you know. So, but I will say on a biker lifestyle, like growing up, you know, in my teen years, in my 20s, I'd see clubs or independent bikers and this and that. And I mean, I'm watching guys having great times at, like, dude, since we talked about being from the same neighborhood, I'm sitting out in front of the Gaslight Strip Club, which is like the back home, right? And I'm watching guys drunk rip wheelies off curbs and like ride off. And I'm like, I want to do that when I grow up. And it, falling in love with motorcycles and this and that. And me growing up the way I did and getting into things the way I did, certainly being a biker and drinking whiskey and getting into bar fights or trouble is like, it's not necessarily off like the to-do list of biker lifestyle, so it wasn't, it's how I lived, it's how I lived it. I lived it to the fullest, and I'll say that, I've got a lot of time around a lot of real bikers, and I really lived it up. And, I still ride, I still, converse with my people regularly, but I'm not, and it's a daily work, not just to not drink, because I haven't had a drink in just over 3 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
June was 3 years, right?
June
for you?
Was 3 years, June 11th.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you. It's really like, even more so than trying not to drink it's more a conscious effort daily to not be that guy, to wake up and just be hell-bent on what's the most extreme thing we can do, not sleep and, walk into the gym drunk and put 400 plus over your head or go get into trouble or ride 120 miles an hour. I mean, a lot of times it's, I'm not going to lie. I love riding motorcycles. I love living on the edge to a degree. But once my own actions started causing my family harm, that's when I said, okay, it's time for me to quit drinking and time for me to slow life down and really start, putting some time into myself on how to figure out, how to save my family, get my family back, which we haven't gotten into yet. But it's like I said earlier, man, like you can make choices. You got your freedom to make your choices, but you don't get to pick your consequences. And a lot of my consequences came at the expense of my family. And, I can deal with a lot, it's also easy to not care what happens to yourself, meaning like I come up like not really caring whether it's sad to say, but not really caring what happened to me, if I lived or died or whatever, and I always thought I was on some tough guy, but like in my early 20s, I got shot, outside of a bar. And, I got very lucky. I got winged, nothing. I guess it's a serious event, but my injury was not serious. But I knew that it wasn't an image because the next day I'm still out in the street and I'm still drinking and this and that. So I'm okay with accepting my own consequences. What happened with me was I couldn't accept the fact that my decisions were affecting my wife and my children. And, that's where I made the choice to make a concerted effort to knock the off, as I put it, or stop, or whatever you want to call it. So that's how we got to 3 years without drinking alcohol,
That's amazing. Congratulations again. And from what I'm hearing, in your 20s, you talked about it being a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right? So that overcoming the fear, and I don't want to say ego, but for me, I can relate to a little bit of like the fighting through my teens. That was ego. That was to look cool in front of my friends.
Sure.
I did not continue it once I got out of college. When you did, it sounds like then you joined, a family, right? A club where you were leveling up that lifestyle and really rolling the dice and upping the ante a bit.
I'll say that I remember this, and again, I'm going to not speak on my club, or the club I belong to, I should say. But I will say this. Getting out of high school in those years, I remember I leveled up immediately. So I'm 19, 20 years old working at these bars. My friends are all 30, 33, 35-year-old guys, some of which guys from the neighborhood that were wrecking bars for 10, 15 years already on their own. And it's like I'm just the youngest guy on the roster. So I went years before ever even entertaining leveling up with a club, let's say, or something like that. I was already, pressing the limits on a daily, to either die or go to prison. And if I'm being honest, some of the decisions I made later on, actually kind of calm things down, when you're not just responsible for yourself, but for kids or even other people, you kind of think twice before you walk blindly off an edge. But I'll say that after my father passed in 2017, and I'm looking around, and like I said, like the water was shut off. We had to short sell a house. My wife's at the time estranged from her family, like to a degree, like they're in New York. I've got no one left in terms of blood relatives. I'm blessed with some really great people in my life, but just that's when it hit, and it had nothing to do with like a lifestyle choice. It was like, all right, I'm so broken. Like, I don't care what happens next. All I know is I got to go and, make sure these kids have some food to eat. And so like when I go back to bouncing, it starts at 60 a night. And then within 2 months, I'm making 250 a night. And then, certain places and people, I'm making 500 a night, 1,000 a night, 1125 a day. I mean, some real astronomical numbers doing security, but at the same time, I'm drinking my way through it. I'm steroiding my way through it. I'm making time for the gym, hangovers in Crown Royal, and being dad it went by the wayside, And then also, if I'm being brutally honest, when you're having them knockdown dragouts with your wife at 1, 2 in the morning because my kids had to experience that. Some of them are fortunate enough where they were so young they don't remember it, even though it was, 4 years ago, roughly, And I've got some other kids that are, one of my oldest is almost 16. She remembers. She remembers.
I can imagine.
She remembers everything, She's been afraid of me. She's been in a position where she feels like, she needs to kind of usher her siblings off into another room because mom and dad are having it out at 2, 3 in the morning because I'm drunk. And then also, the amount of steroids are in my body, even if I wasn't drunk, my like couples argue, that's just the way of the world, right? It's even healthy to a degree, but I'm so short fused because of what's running in my system. Dude, I was completely out of control, absolutely completely out of control. And with that, eventually the consequences came, and they were heavy, and that's when, that's when I decided to quit the drinking and the benzos and the steroids and all that, I guess I'll jump into it, man. My wife and I even discussed this. She knows I'm coming on here. Like you said, you spoke to her, and I end up separating from my wife for a time.
What year is this?
2020 going into 2021.
So this is the first year of COVID.
Yeah. And at that point, all there is to sit home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was all I chose to do anyway, was sit home and drink and then ride motorcycles because, bars are closed, this, that. And then honestly, I also hit another low because as I'm working with nightclubs, some celebrities, different organizations, everything's closed in 2020. So my workload goes from making money to not making money, and I'm in debt again. All those feelings of losing everything come back like I did in 2017. And so I start to heavily drink again. And it's tough to talk about, but, I left my wife for a short time for another woman that was a friend of hers, her best friend, which is brutal for me to say out loud or say that I did that. My wife and I discussed me discussing this here, and she's so supportive. She's like, Matt, that's your story. Share it. We're through it. We're on the other side. So God bless her, for that. But I end up, moving out. And as I move out and I'm living with this other woman, on the other side of town, now I'm spending less time with my kids. I'm throwing more time into work, drinking, everything, because what I was doing, I knew I was doing wrong. And the overwhelming shame and guilt of that, I feel like you're always going to, if you're an alcoholic, you're going to find a reason to drink regardless.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. Like, hey man, the Yanks won a game. Like, let's have a beer, right? Or hey,
Yanks lost.
Yeah, let's have a beer. Exactly. Bro, perfectly said. Perfectly said. And, so with that shame and this and that, I just threw myself down that rabbit hole, a real dark rabbit hole, real fast, to where even real close people to me are putting a hand on my shoulder as a friend and as a brother. Like, bro, the you doing? You got a beautiful family at home. That woman loves you. Sober up. Go to home. And I'm like, I'm fine. And I'm in my mode. I'm in my alcoholism. And I'm like, it's not me, it's her. Or, hey, Matt, you should sober up. I'm like, I need to make more money and we'll be all right. You should sober up. No. I just, I need to do anything other than sober up would be my answer when people would tell me to sober up. And so I end up going home. There was a lot of back and forth at that time, between the two women, my wife and this other woman. And I end up going home. And we're trying to make it work. And I think I'm home. I don't even think we were there like 2 weeks. And it's right back to, and it's my fault, but it's right back to arguing and this and that. And this is the last night I had a drink. I go out. I'll never forget, I borrowed money from my boss at the time. I borrowed money to get a divorce lawyer. Get the money for the divorce lawyer and 2 bottles of Crown. Come home, I got the money for the divorce lawyer sitting on a counter and 2 bottles of Crown Royal. And in my mind, I'm just thinking it's going to be like another night. That evening was so loaded with so much emotion before the alcohol, to sit there and think that, I could have drank and had some other kind of normal outcome, like just go to bed and wake up tomorrow and start a divorce proceeding, is absurd. And what did happen was arguments, screaming, yelling, doors getting broken, my children screaming, seeing the worst sides of me, and their mother. We both drank that night. I think at that point, all jokes aside, but I think she needed a drink too with what she was going through, because I'm putting this woman through hell, and she doesn't know what to do, So that happens, and I'll never forget, that was on a Friday. And by Sunday, I come home, and I went for a ride on a bike to clear my head. I come home, and the house is empty. And I'm just kind of like looking around. I'm like, that's weird. I wonder where everybody is. And I'm calling phones. I'm calling my daughter's phone. I'm calling my wife. Nothing. Sure enough, I don't hear from them for like 3 days. They took off back to our home state, hometown in New York. She left and took the kids. And the ultimatum I got wasn't even stop drinking and I'll come back to you. She goes, we'll come back to the house when you move out. We're done. The kids have been through enough. I've been through enough. And she was right. She was absolutely right to do that. In my haste and desperation to try and get them back, because in my mind, I'm freaking out. I'm like, my kids are gone. No matter what I ever did, Kev, I always went home, whether I was or not, or bloodied or not, or bullet wounded or not. I always went home and the kids were still there. She was still there. She's always been that rock. And for the first time, money comes and goes, but children are children, family's family. And I hold that in high regard, especially, with, as we've now discussed, both parents being gone, et cetera. The only people that bear my last name are my wife and my children in this world. And I love them, so I'm on the phone, dude. I'm like a car salesman. I'll quit drinking, just come home. I'll change, I'm my way to the hilt. And she doesn't come home for like, I want to say maybe 3 weeks or something. But that night was the last night I had a drink. And I'm just waiting for her to come back. In my mind, she'll come back. Things will get normal. I'll pour a drink for myself. I'll slide one to her. Everything will be all right. And I remember it was the night before Father's Day. And I'm thinking, all right, she still hasn't come home. She's been telling me at this point, give me some time, I'll come home, I'll come back. And this would be the first Father's Day since I became a father where I'd been alone. So in my mind, I kind of like had this Christmas Eve feeling you have like when a kid, like you're going to wake up in the morning, you know, to some cool things. I'm thinking she's going to come back on, you know, Father's Day. And I wake up and it's like 11 o'clock and I'm nervous and I'm looking around the house, I'm alone. And then it's 1 o'clock and 2. And then I get a FaceTime from New York so that the kids can wish me a happy Father's Day. And it hits me, they're not coming home. And that was the lowest of the low. Out of everything I've been through in life, burying family, burying some other people in my life, you know, that was a rock bottom that hit so hard where it was enough. It was enough. I had finally found my rock bottom. She does come home a few weeks, maybe not a few weeks, maybe like a week later. She ends up coming home and I never drank again. It's probably the only promise I've ever kept in my life, knock on wood, you know, and I hope I keep it till, you know, my day comes, you know, but it's, yeah, man, the only promise I've ever kept is this one.
When did you make the decision in your head going from the used car salesman, like
Right.
you just said, not really having all the intentions of staying sober actually,
Right.
to actually keeping that promise
Yeah.
and staying sober? Because I had that same experience.
Did you?
Yeah, but go ahead.
I wasn't going to talk about it, but we'll talk about it. It's just hard to admit to, especially for like a man like me. I try to keep my chin up through anything, right? And to say that my rock bottom was, you know, thinking I'm going to take myself out, you know. So that night on that Father's Day, I'm sitting there and I had typed it out, you know, like a goodbye and an I'm sorry, you know, and like a PS, I'm leaving the front door open, you know. And I sat there and you know, I sat there in the bathroom, you know, and was just trying to work up the nerve to go away. You know what I mean? I can't even say the word. It's still that. I can't even say the word of what it is I was trying to do that night. And I don't know, I didn't have some, you know, I don't have some fairy tale story of like, I heard this voice that told me not to do it. I'm gonna be honest with you, Kev. I sat there feeling like such a failure. I'm like, I'm the guy that'll like go to squeeze a trigger and miss and maybe like knock my nose off or something and then just end up disfigured and, you know, for the rest of my life. It was that much of a low. And I remember I went to bed. I just went to bed and, you know, she came home a week later and, again, it's the only promise I've kept. Things haven't been perfect in the 3 years. You know, there's a lot of work to do. Therapy on my end, therapy on hers, marriage counseling, you know, helping my oldest through some things that she was going through as a byproduct of what she's seen and experienced, which is tough, right, as a parent, but it's about her, so it's whatever she needs. So we did that too. And now I can say that we're in a place after 3 years where I feel like my wife trusts me for probably the first time in the 19 years that we're together, which feels fantastic. I almost don't know how to act sometimes. You know, she's so wonderful and has treated me with so much forgiveness and grace that, you know, I'm kind of like, I'll sit there very surreal, like, is this a dream? Like, this can't be real. Like, I got them back. I don't deserve them, you know? And then even my oldest, she trusts me enough to come to me with things now. It took a few years, but like even recently, you know, she's a teenager going through those teenage things we all go through, right? And she comes to me like 2 weeks ago, I want to say, and just she vented some stuff and cried on Dad's shoulder. That's literally never happened. And I never realized that never happened up until like 2 weeks ago when it was happening. I'm like, wow, we've never done this. And I'm grateful, man. I'm really grateful. I'm really, really grateful for what I got back, you know. And I'm thankful that she decided to come home, you know, but that was my bottom, you know, that was my rock bottom, you know, with the alcohol. The only thing that stopped it was losing everything that I love. It didn't matter if my life was to be lost, or in some situations, you know, the guy next to me could be getting hurt or losing his life. None of these consequences, all terrible consequences, by the way, death, imprisonment, whatever, it wasn't enough. But you take those kids away from me for a month, as they should have been, you know, it was enough to straighten me out and to start thinking different.
So when I first got sober and I would go to meetings, I came up with every excuse in the book. Oh, I'm too busy. I have too much work. I have a wife at home. I had 0 kids at the time,
right.
And I thought I had all this responsibility and not enough time to get sober.
Right.
You got sober with 4 kids, amending a marriage,
Yeah.
working, providing for your family. What got you through that time and kept you in the game of sobriety and got you to 3 years now?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. I don't think it was one thing. I think, you know, like I went to the meetings, you know, I went to AA on and off the first year quietly, like on my own, because I wasn't ashamed. It was just kind of like so much of my business had been out there, you know, with what I put my family through. It was just kind of time to, in my mind, I was like, all right, whatever I'm going to go through next, I'm going to go through it quietly, you know. And if you're going to see me do anything, you're going to see me win. You know, that's kind of like that ego we talk about, right? But I was going to meetings, and to be honest, I never shared in one of those meetings. I would always sit and I would listen, and I would hear so much similarity in what other people went through and what other people go through. I'm like, wow, dude, like, number one, get off your high horse. You're not special. You're human like everybody else. That was the biggest thing I learned from listening to other people share. So that was one of the main things. There was a subtle moment that I didn't realize. Like, I had a buddy come over, you know, and I had 2 buddies come over actually, and, you know, and I don't drink, and they were sipping on a bottle, and they had left it when they left. And when my daughter came home, my oldest daughter, you know, the teenager that remembers everything, turns and looks. She's like, Dad, I thought you stopped drinking. And I'm like, Madison, like, I swear, like, this is not Dad's, you know, but that's whiskey and that's your thing. And I was like, kiddo, like, almost like, you know, I've had to have that buddy that brought the bottle go to my kid, like, hey, kiddo, this was your Uncle so-and-so's, not, you know, Dad did not touch this bottle. And in seeing her fear.
Oh, yeah.
Seeing her fear of that moment, I wasn't out of control. I'm standing there calm, but just her seeing a bottle of alcohol that had been cracked in the home and just seeing this kid go white like a ghost. I was like, no, never again. I can't. So, like, when you ask me, like, what got me through, I think it was a little bit of everything. Some good, some bad. Sometimes I'm like, I would feel so ashamed, like, I can't be that guy again. Like, dude, you relinquished your honor. You know what I mean? Like, I don't ever want to relinquish that again. I want to fight to get that back. You know, that was the part for me. The other part is like, these kids deserve better. You know, you and I talked earlier, like, there's no manual to this stuff. You know, just be present. I always felt like I was present because I'm in the house, but when you're liquored up or benzoed up, dude, you're there, but you're not there. You're gone. You're checked out.
You're numb. You're numb to everything.
Numb. And those kids are not getting, whether it's a show or not, they're not getting the best version of me. So that was another part. And then the other part too was, man, you know, I'll be honest, I you know, there's certain things I won't talk about, like we discussed, but there's some very close people to me that got cut down very young, murdered, etc., due to, ways of life, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. I mean, people very close to me. One that used to live in my home, someone I call brother, passed away. And with that and growing older, like there was never a plan. When I'm 18 and acting like an idiot, you don't think you're going to make it to 21. And then so on and so forth. You're 21, I'll never make it to 25. I'm 30, 35 is not going to happen. Now I'm sitting here, I'm 39, I'm going, holy shit, I'm going to be 40. What are we going to do with life now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are we growing up now? Is this what we're doing? And realizing how short life is, from having so many people around me pass away, go to prison, that was also a massive factor in like, all right, I don't know what life holds, I can't predict the future, but I'm going to do my best. And it's still a fight, and not so much just with the alcohol. It's a daily thing to wake up, to be present, to choose to be there. You know what I mean? To choose to go the extra mile, to choose to keep life in balance, to keep my ego in check, to be home, be present, be there for the wife and kids, man. It's so much bigger than just not drinking. It's about being someone I never was before because I wasn't capable, and now I hope I am, right? So I'll never sit anywhere and toot my own horn, but like every day's a work in progress. Every day's a choice and a chance to do something different. And I'm just trying to do my best. Like I'm just trying to be dad. I'm trying to be the husband that they all deserve, and that's where I'm at now.
Did the lifestyle have any kind of ripple effect on your children, especially the 16-year-old, given what you just shared about, someone who you considered a brother or just uncles or people that were close to you that were either murdered or not here today?
Sure.
Are they asking?
Yeah. So tough. The middle kids were a little more naive to a degree, like one of their, they called them uncles, so I'll call them uncle. One of their uncles, passed away. He was shot to death in a bar fight. And, God, we miss him and love him so much. And my oldest, because you can't hide her. She's got the phone. She's got Google. She hears, so the oldest one, immediately I sat down. I said, hey, we lost so-and-so this evening. This is how. I'd rather you hear it from me. Try to be as honest as I can with my children and not hide anything. Because the moment you start, I've realized this, when you lie and hide things, whether it's your kids or other people just think it's worse, especially your kids. Like if dad's lying to me about this much, is it really this big or is the problem this big? So as my kids get older, I try to be as honest as I can be with them about what's going on currently and what might have gone on in the past. They have asked questions, I've explained, hey, they'll be like, hey, where's Uncle so-and-so? And I'm like, passed away. They said, well, how, Dad? And I'm like, all right. He's in a better place now. I run out of words, don't know what to say. And then a year or two goes by, and now the then 10-year-old is now a 12-year-old, and she's got the phone, and hits Google and comes in and goes, how come you didn't tell me Uncle so-and-so was shot and killed? And then I have to answer questions. They're confused. They're confused. They don't understand why, which, there's never really a reason why, right? Even us as adults, you always, when you lose somebody, it's like, oh man, that was stupid. Like that was so unnecessary. I wish he was here. Like, it's just not worth it, right? That's at least my initial reaction when I lose someone, tragically. But when you're trying to explain it to a child that now knows, that someone that was in their life that they loved, where there's pictures of dad and him on the wall, and now even there's some paintings and stuff, it hits them. And I remember she asked, my second oldest daughter, she just wanted to know why he was shot. And I don't have an answer because, and I do have an answer, but it's an answer that I'm not ashamed of, but it's an answer that mimics the way I was living. I don't want to say to her and say, you know, because to me, like, he passed away knowing and making a conscious choice of lifestyle and how we live, and and that cost him his life. How do I tell my 12-year-old, like, hey, kiddo, when you were about 1 or maybe even before you were born, your dad decided to live life a certain way that's detrimental to himself and those around him to a degree, and I'm not, that's nothing against anybody. That's just how I chose to live my life. I chose to pick the worst predicament 10 times out of 10 and put myself in that situation. How do I explain to a 12-year-old that they lost someone they love over a senseless bar fight? And to me, it's like, well, we're out there. We've been out there, and, I've been working in bars and clubs and working for people doing private security. I could have, and I've been shot. I've been poked a couple times. It easily could have been me. It's hard to find the words. And I guess really now that I'm kind of on the spot as we sit here, I really haven't had them. I'm just trying to do my best, and you give an explanation, because you don't want to justify that behavior to your kid, but at the same time, you never want to discredit someone you love for the choices they made, as they've passed. I like to think that person that passed away with courage and honor, At the end of the day, though, I wish he was here, right? But I'm not going to tell my 12-year-old, well, courage and honor and this and that cost him his life ultimately in the end. It's not something I try to teach my 12-year-old daughter, so it's hard to find the words. When she asks why, and this kid's slick for 12, man. Like, she's very good at critical thinking, I try to slip stuff past her like she's still 9 years old and, time's a thief, and, realize just how
aware.
Dude, they're on it.
Yep.
They are on it. Mm-hmm. They're on it. So yeah, man.
It sounds like I'm hearing a lot of accountability and vulnerability. And I'm saying that because I had the same experience and still continue to have the same experience. You talked about the fear at a young age, and then you even just talked about the fear of not picking up the phone when you got your wife's number for the first time out of fear.
Sure.
Like, you're putting yourself out there in a vulnerable state.
Yeah.
I've known you for some time.
Yeah.
It's not always been that way with you.
No.
So how did you get to a place where you're able to take accountability for your actions, practice vulnerability and humility, which in turn equates trust that you have now with your wife, trust that you now have with your 16-year-old? How did you get to that place?
I'll be honest, a lot of it, first of all, there's a lot that comes with not drinking. Like, that first year not drinking, I was like, wow. Like,
pink cloud.
Dude.
You're just high off life.
Yeah, man. And then, year 2 and year 3, you get a little clearer and you have time to process things. Yeah. And if I'm being, like this is going to sound cheesy, we've been giving the wife nothing but shout outs on this one, right? My wife, not only, being so wonderful to me and taking me back and et cetera, she's been able to be vulnerable because people know that I left. She knows I'm here now talking to you, and eventually this will be, for the world to see, right? And she's so comfortable with her story being shared, and not embarrassed and chin up, chest out as a woman, where I'm kind of like, man, like, why don't I take some ownership too? And like you just said a moment ago, like, you and me go back a ways, and when you hit me up with the opportunity to come on and share, I'm like, you know what? I sat all those meetings maybe too afraid, I don't know, but definitely not willing to share anything going on in my day. at all those AA meetings that I went to and this and that. Like, I've definitely shared with close friends and confidants. And I've got some wonderful people in my life and that have really backed me up when I'm trying to pull myself back together, you know, and I'm blessed for that. But if my wife can, you know, so to speak, take this on the chin and move forward, you know, and kind of lay it out there for the world to see, so can I. And I feel like there's a part about it where you got to give back, right? So, you know, I don't think I'm special. I don't think anything I've ever done is cool. But if you know, and it might sound cliche or whatever, but if somebody somewhere, you know, can see somebody with a similar background as me or similar situation like I used to see when I went to AA, or even what I saw with some of my own people that have really been there for me, be vulnerable, you know, take responsibility and not be afraid to kind of put yourself out there, you know, because people might have things to say about me sitting here and, oh my God, he did this or that. But you know what? I got my wife, I got my kids, and the truth is the truth. Whether I hide it, whether I share it, whether I try to forget it, or I talk about it, it's still what it is. You can't change it. The past is the past. You know, even listening to you speak a lot, you know, because I listen to your thing, you know, before I come on, and life on life's terms, man. You know, so here we are, you know, I'm here to share, and I hope it helps somebody. And also, if I'm being selfish to a degree, I hope it helps me too, you know, by getting it off my chest, right? And I hope when I go home and eventually this is seen, I hope my wife sees it and we come closer again. I've found that since I stopped drinking, the amount of secrets we had from each other going back to 19 and 20 years old it's astronomical, dude. And the more, and it's so crazy, but the more we have shared and been honest and open with each other, not only just about like who we are, but or like maybe the things we've done to each other, where maybe I've done something years ago and she never would have known unless I told her, but I tell her. Just getting it all out on the table gave us, at least in my house, a new opportunity and a new lease on having a family and keeping the family together. So if that's what works, if that's the formula that we found that works, that's what we're going to do, you know? So that's why, you know what I mean? I'm here talking to you, you know?
If you could go back to Matt in high school.
Holy hell.
And give him one piece of advice before he was about to enter that lifestyle, what would it be?
Wow. Powerful question. I would tell that guy, you're going to be all right. It's going to be all right, but buckle the up, because you're going to get everything you think you want. Everything you're asking for, you're going to get it. So buckle up, you know, because it's going to be a wild ride, you know. So chin up, chest out, kid. That's what I would tell that guy, you know. Would
you recommend that they take another route?
You know what? It might sound counterproductive, but I believe that, you know, when I used to walk around with a victim mentality, I would think, like, why is this happening to me? Why were my parents so negative? Why this, that? You know what, man? I've learned that things happen for you and not to you. So right now I have this amazing family. Maybe I wouldn't have had them, you know, if I didn't go through all these ups and downs and peaks and valleys, you know. Maybe I never would have met my wife in the first place if I wasn't being a bouncer at the worst damn bar in town, you know. Maybe I never would have achieved this great relationship I have with my wife and my children that I have now, unless life kind of kicked my ass, and I kicked my own ass along the way too, right? I'd like to think that, you know, like I said, man, life happens for you and not to you, you know, and there's always a reason, you know. Yeah, man, there's always a reason, and that's why, you know. So
before we wrap up,
sure.
Have you ever done any work for the mob?
Whoa.
Had to slip it right in there.
Man, All right, Kevin. I've done security for many a people in this life, but Kev, there's no such thing as the mob, right? It doesn't exist.
And we're going to wrap up there. Maddie, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely,
I appreciate it. You're a miracle. Congratulations on 3 years of sobriety.
Thank you, bro.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thanks.